Siblings, lend me your ears, for I am here to talk of the crisis of accountability. The great challenges that we face in the coming years are all based upon a dangerous lack of accountability. Firstly, economic accountability. The idea of the last 40 years, the neoliberal experiment, which says not only that the market alone can best decide how to distribute resources around society, but also, when challenged, its leaders say there is no alternative to this idea of free market neoliberalism. As a result of this, the individual citizen no longer has a sense of agency over their lives, over their place in society, but also within the economy. The corporations have far too much power. Globalization has liberated them from the need to pay taxes in the places where they make their profits. As a result, it's almost impossible for governments of any shape to hold them economically, socially, and I would argue politically to account. The second great challenge we face is the challenge of climate change, and that clearly is a crisis for accountability, because we as individuals have to play a role in trying to save the planet, but it is the power of corporations, of institutions, of nations that can really do something about the way that the climate is changing. It shouldn't be left to a 16-year-old from Scandinavia to take charge of a campaign to save our planet. We must all be involved. We must all be trying to hold those in power, economic power and political power, to account. The third great challenge that we face is automated decision making. The ability of algorithms to decide whether or not you're worthy of credit of any sort, not just economic credit, but of any sort, is a huge crisis of accountability, because whoever has programmed this algorithm may not be compatible with who you are as an individual. So do we surrender ourselves to the power of algorithms and attempt to match their conception of who we should be, or do we stand on our own individualism? Who will police the bias within the algorithm? But the greatest threat to us all, in terms of urgency, in terms of something that is already upon us, something that we see all around us, is the rise of populism. The authoritarian leader is the prime example of alpha male unaccountability. Their whole idea, the way they put their policies across, such as they are, is all about remaining beyond account. We've seen it even today with Nigel Farage confronted on the BBC about his policies. He had no answer except to attack the BBC. And this is something we see around the world. Authoritarians in Brazil, in Hungary, in Israel, in Poland, here in Great Britain, in form of the Brexit campaign, they have no answers. And those ideas they have are simplistic. Why do you think they like no deal so much? Because it's a blank sheet. It needs no explaining. And this is the real challenge we face. When Donald Trump, during the presidential campaign in 2016, was confronted live on TV in one of the debates about his treatment towards women, he deflected the answer by saying, "I don't believe in political correctness." And the funny thing is, I don't believe in political correctness either, because it does not exist. There is no such thing as political correctness. It is a trope that is used by those who are trying to police the limits of social change. It's a complete deflection. There is no political party running on a program of political correctness. There are no academics writing the ideology of political correctness. There are no marches in the streets, people demanding more political correctness. It is a right-wing trope that is being used by people to keep women, people of colour, LGBT communities, minorities generally, in their place. And how do they do it? They do it by having a very defined notion of what constitutes freedom. As far as the right are concerned, freedom is only the liberty to say what you want to say, whenever you want to say it, to whoever you want to say it to, with no comeback. Now, if that is the definition of freedom, then it is not Martin Luther's "I have a dream" speech that we should look to as the exemplar of emancipation, but the Twitter feed of Donald Trump. Because that is an exact example of what happens when you allow someone to say what they want without any kind of comeback. And this is why the notion of liberty that we currently have has to be challenged. And my book is an attempt to argue that freedom actually is more than just the right to say whatever you want. Freedom is a very a word that can easily be challenged. It doesn't have any single meaning, freedom. You know, we as a metaphor, we often say as free as a bird. But the right of the bird to feed is incompatible with the right of the farmer to grow crops. Who has the liberty in that argument, the bird or the farmer? Well, both. And both feel their liberty is infringed when one comes in to contact the other in a field of crops. So that idea of liberty, of freedom, is ill-defined and often determined by where you stand in the power structure. So what I'm trying to argue in my book is that we need a more three-dimensional definition of what it means to be free. Yes, liberty, the right to self-expression, that is the absolute foundation of freedom. Of course it is, because it empowers us to express ourselves to the world, and that should never be infringed. However, when you have that right, in order for everybody to be able to express that, you have to reciprocate to every other individual their right to express their point of view. That's equality. Equality is the second dimension of freedom, and it's a reciprocal dimension, and it's crucial because it broadens the scope of freedom beyond just us and what we want. That idea of the unfettered self, that's not freedom. Because when you're in society, you do have responsibilities to others, and one of those responsibilities is respect for their point of view. However, there's another crucial dimension of freedom that is missing, that helps us balance the division between liberty and equality, between the unfettered self and the community. And that principle is accountability. How we hold one another to account and what we say and what we do. And accountability is crucial because as liberty empowers the individual to say what they want to say, and equality, the individual must reciprocate to others, accountability combines these because it's both empowering, it empowers you to hold those in power to account, but it's also reciprocal. You have to make yourself available to be held to account. You have to accept that if your liberty, in expressing your liberty, you say something that people find offensive or worse, abusive, you're going to catch shit for it. And you can't stand back when you are challenged and say, you're infringing my liberty. People who say that don't understand the difference between censorship and consequences. All words, all actions have consequences. And if we are to live in a society where freedom is available to the maximum number of people, then we have to be able to recognize that it's not just about me and what I say. It's about all of us and what we all say and how we come to some agreement about what is acceptable to say and what is not acceptable to say. Because democracy was built to both give the individual that power, that liberty of expression, but also through its laws to balance that up with the benefit that is to the whole community. For freedom of speech, freedom of expression has never been a complete universal ideal. It's always had limits, even in the United States of America, where freedom of speech is almost fetishized. There are still limitations under the Constitution to that. And unfortunately, the tide of populism is driven by players, bad faith players, often operating online, who are using freedom of speech as a battering ram to deny the right of expression of minorities, to deny any kind of accountability for what they say, to deny us to be able to find a balance between the rights of the individual and the rights of society. So that is the case I'm trying to make in the book, that yes, your right to say what you want to say is sacred and should not be prohibited, but that comes with consequences. And providing you are willing to accept the consequences of your actions, then we remain in a free society. But when men come to power, and for some reason it almost always is men, who believe that there are no consequences to their actions, that they can work and say and express anything they like with no comeback, then that is when freedom becomes dangerous. Now you might think to yourself, how can freedom become dangerous? It's such a wonderful thing. Everybody loves freedom. Yes, freedom, when it's emancipatory, is a wonderful thing. But freedom in its extreme can also lead to impunity. And when someone acts with impunity in the way that Donald Trump acts with impunity, when the American Congress tried to hold him to the Constitution, when politicians in our country questioned about the validity of a no-deal Brexit, just brush things aside and attack the person who is interviewing, when people online immediately attack you when you challenge them, that impunity itself undermines our freedom. It undermines all of our freedom. So I've written the book because I believe, whether we like it or not, the Trumpian view of social discourse is coming to this country as it is coming to other countries. If he had not been elected, I probably wouldn't have needed to write this book, because all the right-wing authoritarian bigotry would have stayed kind of in the distance, online, away from us all. But sadly, the election of Donald Trump has brought it frothing to the surface, and it will continue to infect the discourse that we have as individuals and a society, unless we can build a defence against it that calls it out at every step. Because we have not just one line to cross, we have 3 lines to cross. We have liberty, we have equality, and we have accountability. Thank you very much.